rural Western Maryland. In this session, we'll focus on strategies for tackling the argument essay. First, let's review some key tips. First, the thesis point is paramount. It is so important. Without the thesis point, you can only earn 3 of the 6 total points. Without a thesis, you can only earn 2 evidence points and a reasoning point. This essay does not have an intro paragraph or a conclusion. Your intro is your single sentence thesis, and we'll talk about what your conclusion is momentarily. Your thesis should be 1 sentence. You want to provide a claim and a line of reasoning. State your claim, which is your position on the prompt, add because, and add your line of reasoning. When doing your line of reasoning, don't document drop. You should not use documents or court cases as your line of reasoning. Instead, use course concepts. So for example, instead of saying, because of Federalist 70, you could say, because the president is a single executive with many unilateral powers. Don't use I believe or I think, just state your position as fact. Let's talk evidence. You're going to need to provide 2 pieces of evidence and reasoning. The first thing you're going to do is describe your first piece of evidence. This description should let the reader know that you know the main ideas or themes of the evidence. You want to avoid direct quotes. They're not required or expected. When you do your reasoning, you can feel free to use some transitional wording to alert the reader that you've moved to reasoning. Your reasoning should directly connect back to the reasoning you provided in your thesis. Remember, 1 piece of evidence must come from the prompt. It doesn't have to be your first piece of evidence, but I highly recommend that you do use your first piece of evidence as the one from the prompt because it's going to be a lot easier to not forget it when you do that. Your second piece of evidence can also come from the prompt, or it can be from any big idea or course concept, or a Supreme Court case if you choose. And finally, I mentioned earlier, there's no conclusion in this FRQ. Instead, you're going to use an opposing viewpoint. You're going to describe a counterclaim, and then you're either going to explain the rebuttal or the refutation. For this section, you might want to consider using some transition wording, like others may argue. You're going to state the opposing viewpoint to the one you have presented, and then explain why others might argue that opposing viewpoint. Then you're going to follow that up by restating your position and explaining why your position is still superior. So before we practice this argument essay, let's go over some course concepts that we'll need to know to answer this prompt. This prompt says, the federal government and the states each play an important role in public education. Take a position on whether the federal government or the states are more effective in ensuring educational opportunities for all students. Our 3 prompt documents are the 14th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, and Article 1. So, in order to answer this FRQ, the first thing we're going to need to understand is federalism. Federalism is one of our key principles of government and says that power is divided and shared between the federal government and the states. We also need to understand the difference between delegated and reserved powers. Delegated powers refer to those powers that are specifically delegated to or given to the national government. Many of these powers are located in Article 1, Section 8, where the enumerated or numbered powers of Congress can be found. On the other hand, reserved powers are those powers that do not belong to the national government and are instead reserved or set aside for the states. These powers are given to the states by way of the 10th Amendment, but they are not listed like the delegated powers of Congress. The 10th Amendment grants any power not given to the national government or denied to the states respectively. This amendment serves as the basis of reserved powers. The 14th Amendment is one of the 3 Civil War amendments. It includes the Citizenship Clause, the Equal Protection Clause, and the Due Process Clause, which is also the clause that allows for the incorporation of the rights within the Bill of Rights to the states. And finally, we have Article 1 of the Constitution, which lays out the structure of the legislative branch. It establishes the House and Senate. Article 1, Section 8 holds the delegated and enumerated powers of Congress, while Article 1, Section 9 outlines the denied powers of Congress. All right, let's practice this argument essay. Part A, respond to the prompt with a defensible claim or thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. As a reminder, the prompt is we are taking a position on whether the federal government or the states are more effective in ensuring educational opportunities for all students. We must respond with a defensible claim or thesis, and we must establish a line of reasoning. Before you pause the video to craft your response, if you want to follow along carefully, I'll be taking the position that the federal government is more effective. However, you're more than welcome to choose the other side if you like. Please pause the video now and craft your response. The student responded, the federal government is more effective in ensuring educational opportunities for all students because they have the overall power to enforce our natural rights, Bill of Rights, from the Constitution. And the federal government holds more power over the states, which would ensure quicker, more effective protection of educational opportunities. So let's see how the student earned the point. First, they clearly establish a claim. They say that it's the federal government that is more effective. And finally, they use their because to connect us to their line of reasoning that it's more effective because it's quicker and easier to provide educational opportunities. Again, to get that thesis point, you need the claim with the line of reasoning. You have to have both pieces to get that thesis point. All right, part B is going to be our first piece of evidence. one piece of evidence must come from one of the foundational documents. So we're going to practice this by choosing one of these three to describe our piece of evidence. You can choose any of the three you like. I'll let you know in advance that I'm going to be choosing the 14th Amendment. Please pause your video now and craft a response.
Put your tongue and blow her out. Did you feel it, did you? Say that word, suelo. Perfect. Now, suelo no marques las horas, porque voy a enloquecer. That means, clock, don't mark the hours because I'm going nuts.
Clock don't mark the hours because you're going nuts?
That's the wording.
Dad, what's this all about?
This is about learning.
The student answered, the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution supports my claim because within the amendment there is the equal protection and equal opportunity clauses. These ensure that one can't be discriminated by color, race, and religion, which would ensure that there would be equal educational opportunities since discrimination isn't an option. So let's see where the student earned the point. At the very beginning, they clearly describe the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and they accurately describe it as it relates to their thesis. Also, they chose a foundational document from the prompt, so they get a check for that.
Is your child scrolling on social media all day? Try a coding course where kids learn.
All right, we're still on part B, but now we're going to look at our second piece of evidence. As a reminder, since the student already used a prompt document, they don't have to choose another piece of evidence from the list of three provided in the prompt, but they're more than willing to do so. I'll let you know in advance, I'm going to be using a Supreme Court case for this second piece of evidence, but you're more than welcome to choose something else or something from the prompt. Please pause the video now and craft your response.
So what you're saying is, I gotta learn how to sing this stuff.
Clock don't mark the hours. Notice that? Going nuts. Baby. No matter, it's like so bad.
¿Cómo le dicen? Reaganomics. A lot of small businesses have gone broke.
Me either. Do you know how many cousins we have? And then we call sisters.
Marcella, let's go. Come on. Hey, Vega, my keys are in. Come on out here, check the house. What? Hey, B, keys on the seat. Come on. Yeah, Abraham Quintanilla, de los Dinos. Yeah, from the 60s. Yep. Man, it's good to talk to you too. Listen, the reason I'm calling is because it's Gasolina y the Dinos. You know, none of the old Dinos. These are all new Dinos. You're not gonna believe this. They're my kids. Gasolina's my daughter. Yeah, well, she's 9 years old. But Freddie, look, she's great. You gotta believe me. No, she's got all the moves. She's a natural performer, sing from the heart. No, Freddie, listen, please. I don't care about the money.
The student responded, the federal government's judicial branch further supports my claim because they're able to deem state laws or practices as unconstitutional. A prime example would be the Supreme Court ruling in Brown versus Board of Education. The Supreme Court was able to rule that segregation of schools and denying African American students enrollment into white schools is unconstitutional. So the student identifies the piece of evidence they're using, the Supreme Court case of Brown v. Board of Ed, and they use that case to accurately describe it as it relates to their thesis. All right, for part C is going to be our reasoning. We have to use reasoning to explain why the evidence we just wrote about supports our claim or thesis. So please pause the video now and craft your response. The student answered, so it's shown that the judicial branch part of the federal government can effectively overturn segregation in schools, which results in equal educational opportunities for African Americans. So let's see how the student earned a point. The student earns a reasoning point for accurately explaining how the federal government is more effective than the state government because of the judicial branch's ability to overturn segregation, thus providing equal educational opportunities for African Americans. All right, so for part D, we're not writing a conclusion. Instead, we're going to respond to an opposing or alternate perspective using refutation or rebuttal. Please pause the video and craft your response now. As a reminder, we've written this FRQ on the basis of the federal government being more effective, so my opposing viewpoint is going to be that the states are more effective. The student answered, others may argue that states are more effective in ensuring educational opportunities for all because they're more involved locally and have their 10th Amendment rights to make policies ensuring equal educational opportunities. But my claim still reigns supreme because Congress, part of the federal government, could easily pass a legislation that would mandate a specific equal educational policy that would take care of every state, not just one alone. So let's see where the student earned the point. They have some nice transitional wording, which others may argue. They state that the states are more effective, which is the opposing viewpoint to the one they described in their thesis. And the other key part of this point is they reiterated their thesis and why they believe the federal government is still more effective in ensuring educational opportunities for all students. Thank you for watching Session 7.